Now, of course, you're going to want to safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground and the suspension is able to hang low. We'll continue on by removing all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts and then the wheel. After that, we're going to go ahead and remove this shield right here. If you were to look along the front of it, you're going to find 4 plastic push clips. Let's go ahead and remove all 4 of those, and then we'll make our way to the inboard side and remove the 2 that are in there. Now, when you remove these, you only want to grab onto the outer portion. This inner portion is going to stay up there. Once you separate it, it should unlock. Let's make our way in here for the last 2. Let's have a look at the tie rod end that we're going to be replacing. You can tell that it has this curve that comes this way. You want to make sure that it matches up with the original. Now, something that I'm going to mention with this tie rod end is it actually has a sleeve that it goes into right here, and then that adapts to the rest of the tie rod end that goes over towards the passenger side. With that said, typically it gets frozen inside of here. Now, if that's the case, generally it's a good idea to just go ahead and replace the entire thing. This outer tie rod end, the special sleeve, and of course the other tie rod end making its way down to the passenger side. At minimum, I would go ahead and replace the tie rod end and the adapting sleeve. Let's move along to this area right here. This is a little clamp. To loosen this, we're going to go ahead and remove this 15mm headed nut. There we are. I'll just leave it on there a couple threads. As you can tell, I got plenty of slack. Now I want you to pay attention to the way that the clamp's situated. It has the bolt coming right up along the top. The reason why that is because this would pinch together. What's it going to pinch together? This tube right here. If you were to feel along where my index finger is up along the top, there's a slot that makes its way from here all the way down to the end of this. Go ahead and spray it with some penetrant and let it do its job. Let's continue on with a rubber strap. I'm going to take this and I'm going to come right around this tie rod and go all the way up to the other tie rod right up here. Just go ahead and make a couple times around, and then we can make our way down to the outer tie rod end nut. To remove this, I'm going to use a 21mm socket. Once you have it off of there, just give it a quick inspection. Typically, I keep this on here just a couple threads. Now, the next thing we're going to have to do is break the tie rod end free from the knuckle. That's this area here. To do that, you can either use a hammer, give it a couple loving bonks to break it free, or even use a pickle fork. Now we can grab onto this. We'll go ahead and pull it down and out of here. Now we're going to move along to starting to remove the tie rod end with the sleeve from the other tie rod end. To do this, I'm going to use some long pliers. I'll grab onto this area here and turn this clockwise, the opposite direction than you would normally think. When we're doing that, we also want to make sure that you count the amount of times that this tie rod spins to get removed. There it is, friends. If you were only replacing the tie rod end without the sleeve, the next thing you would want to do is go ahead and remove this from the tie rod end. Typically, it's going to be frozen on the tie rod end, so we're going to replace them both as a pair. The next thing we're going to do is use a nice brush. We're going to come right inside here and try to clean up the threaded area. Once it's cleaned, go ahead and give it a quick inspection. Copper never sees. Now it's going to be time to thread the adapter onto the tie rod end. Before we do that, let's also use some copper never sees on the threads of the tie rod. To put this on here, I'm going to turn it counterclockwise. You want to pretty much bring this all the way down so it's only got a few threads left. Now when we screw this on here, it's a good idea to just compare it to the original. Put them right up against each other and you can see exactly how far that adapter needs to go. Let's go ahead and screw this all the way down until it bottoms out. We'll finish tightening that in a minute. Now let's go ahead and put this into the other tie rod end. When you're putting this on, you want to make sure you put it in the exact amount of threads that it took to remove the original. All right, so at this point I went ahead and adjusted this to the point that I can see that this wants to line up with the knuckle. Slides right in position. Let's take our nut, we'll start it on there. Now let's bottom this out and then torque it to 63 foot-pounds. The next thing you want to do is pay attention to the stud of the tie rod itself. If you were to look closely at it, you're going to see that it has a hole that goes directly through the center. Looking at the nut, you can tell that it has a whole bunch of little castled out slots on it. You want to make sure that you have one of the slots lined up with the corresponding hole in the tie rod. If it isn't, make sure you continue tightening the nut until the very next slot does. Now let's move along to this right here. We're going to use some of our long pliers. We'll just go ahead and make sure that this is nice and snug up against the tie rod end. Now we can move along to the clamp. Once again, you want to make sure that you have the bolt of the clamp in the upward position, not hanging down under here. It needs to be directly above the slot. Once you've got it there, go ahead and snug this up. Make sure it's nice and tight. Let's get our shield back up on here. We're going to line up all 6 of our push pin holes. Once you get it lined up, go ahead and start putting in the push pins. You want to push in the outer aspect first. Once it slides into position, go ahead and lock it down with the center. Now we can go ahead and get our wheel back up on here. Start on all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts, bottom them out, and then when we get the wheel back on the ground, we'll go ahead and torque each of them to 122 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friends, we got our front end back together. What's left to do now? Now of course you're going to want to safely take it for a road test, listen for any funny noises, and of course get yourself down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.